Welcome to the Breaking News Bears podcast. I'm your host, Chris Capone, joined on the talk my co-host once again, Evan Davis. And there's been a lot of news within free agency over the last week. The Los Angeles Dodgers have bolstered their bullpen over the last couple of days. First of all, taking Evan's advice and signing Tanner Scott to a 4-year, $72 million deal, along with signing former Rangers closer Kirby Yates to a deal. The Toronto Blue Jays have finally signed a coveted free agent, signing Anthony Santander to a 5-year, $92 million contract with heavy contract deferrals and an option to make it a 6-year deal. And lastly, just yesterday, the Atlanta Braves struck a deal with Jurickson Profar to fill a gap in their outfield. Now, there's still some more to discuss about free agency, including the potential of Pete Alonso going to the Blue Jays. Why haven't the Padres done anything at all this offseason? But Evan, we'll first start with your Dodgers first. What do you make of them signing both Tanner Scott and Kirby Yates?
Geez, it feels like every podcast we're talking about, what do you think about the Dodgers doing this? What do you think about the Dodgers doing this? And it's really crazy. Like the Tanner Scott one, I kind of laughed at because I was just like, you got to be kidding me. And then the Kirby Yates one comes and I'm like, you got to be kidding me again. Like, what is going on with this team? And look, you may as well just reinforce a bullpen that was heavily taxed in the postseason. And not that it wasn't great, but it definitely could have improved. And, you talk about some of the guys that you had lost, but then you can also add, obviously, Daniel Hudson retired. So that was an arm that is now needed to be replaced. And I think their one thing that they needed was a left-handed reliever. Obviously, you had Bonda and Vesia, but Bonda, he came on as a really solid lefty, but you kind of wanted someone more high leverage, and Tanner Scott obviously fits that mold. And although it's been a smaller sample size, he's finally reaching the prime of his career at the age of 30. And you look at the last two seasons, what he has done in 150 innings, 180 strikeouts, an ERA just above two. This is arguably one of the best left-handed relievers that was available on the market. And it was a matter of time before he ended up in the lap of the LA Dodgers.
Yeah, and I mean, it was just first of all, signing Tanner Scott, it's such a weird thing about it because everyone was like, "Oh, he's the Otani stopper. He's the Otani stopper." That's why the Padres went to go get him. Now he's on the same team as Shohei Otani. Such a lethal lefty to have in the bullpen now, and that entire Dodgers bullpen now is just filled with, guys that can do literally everything. Uh, you still have Trine, and you re-signed him. You still have Michael Kopech. You still have all these other guys, and it looks like the Dodgers are trying to move off of some guys. I saw that there was, some thoughts about them trading Ryan Brazier, and obviously, he was injured or he didn't play a lot of games last year, only 29 that he pitched in. But still, it's like they have such a bolstered pen that they're looking to trade away some really decent relievers that they still have on their roster. It's just a really insane thing now that that's how much they have. Uh, Tanner Scott, Kirby Yates. Kirby Yates was
Yeah.
really good last
I
year.
didn't
Like,
realize how good Kirby Yates was last
yeah,
year.
like Kirby
But
Yates was incredible last year.
But see, like some of the things that like annoy me about Twitter is like, yes, obviously it's the Dodgers making another signing. How much help do they really need? But like, it's mid-January and Tanner Scott and Kirby Yates were still available. So like, I don't want to hear that, oh, well, look at the Dodgers making unfair moves. Like, we're talking a less than a month before spring training, and Kirby Yates was still unsigned. And it's not like he was going to cost that much money. Like, although he did have a great year last year, he's 38 years old. Like, he's obviously in the back end of his career. And I just think it comes down to what the Dodgers obviously have to offer, just in terms of the opportunity to win and the culture that they have built. But like, the fact that Tanner Scott and Kirby Yates were still on the board, like, teams could have signed them, like is what I'm trying to get at here. It just happened to be that they wanted to go play in LA. I don't blame them for wanting to live right next to the beach and then also getting to win 110 games.
Hey, I mean, Kenley Jansen's out there. What about a reunion with the Dodgers there?
Yeah, I don't know. They got to figure out roster spots because, like, and you brought up Brazier and Kopech, and like, Kopech's dealing with. They said that he has forearm inflammation, which is never a good sign for a pitcher, especially. But maybe they're just like saying, hey, look, take the first month off of the regular season. As long as you're back by the All-Star break, I really don't care. I mean, you're on an arbitration deal. And a guy like Brazier's making 4.5 million. He was injured a lot last year too. I think age and attrition is just coming up with him. So I don't really know how much they'll get for a guy like Brazier on the market.
Yeah, but I'm sure some team will, send an offer to him for one of their bottom prospects and just get a deal done.
Hmm.
Um, and then the Dodgers will turn that bottom prospect into a top 20 player in the league. And
Yeah, like how they did with the Michael Bush trade.
yeah. Um, Moving on, we'll talk about the Toronto Blue Jays, and they finally got a free agent. Anthony Santander is a Toronto Blue Jay, and this has basically been ever since the Orioles season ended. He's been linked to the Toronto Blue Jays, and he even said in his press conference they were talking in November about this, about a potential deal, and then 3 months later, it ended up working out. But
Mhm.
the Toronto Blue Jays finally have a coveted free agent with heavy
Yeah.
contract deferrals. They finally got the
Oh
thing to
my
go.
God, like 66% of that contract's deferred.
Yeah.
I'm more
Uh,
just wondering what Santander is doing.
Hey, I don't know. Did he put interest on it? Like he didn't say. Like I don't
I
know
don't
why he
know,
would just
man.
defer the money like that because that money's only going to get worse if there's no interest on it. But hey, I'm not the one making the deal. Um, but yeah, they finally get a deal to go, and he's signed with the Blue Jays. You know, and this isn't just about signing Anthony Santander because now it shows that the Jays are really actually still trying to make moves. And one of the things coming up after this is now there's sort of rumors with them going for Pete Alonso. And then yesterday, two of the Jays beat writers said that no, they haven't actually had any contact with him, or it's not as close as you guys think it is. But all these Mets beat writers have said, yeah, they're actually close to a deal. And it's just, it all comes down to Scott Boras.
Hmm.
They they've said, oh, this is kind of a package deal where if the Jays get Alonso, then Scherzer's going to sign with them for a 1 year, $16 million deal. And it just seems like, Scott Boras is doing it where, oh, we're just going to use the Jays to, ramp up the money for Alonso because we want him to go back to the Mets.
Yeah, and you talk about the Blue Jays and just also how weak the American League is. Like if they do get a guy like Pete Alonso and like Max Scherzer, the name appeal is great, but the player itself, I don't know. He's obviously way, way past his prime years, but yeah, maybe they do get Big Meat Pete, and there were talks about moving Vladdy to third base and then putting Pete Alonso at first base. And, you add a guy like Pete Alonso to that lineup along with Anthony Santander, and even if you could get a little bit more out of guys like Bo Bichette and George Springer, you're talking about a pretty solid lineup. The starting rotation, a little wonky, but curious to see how Bowden Francis responds back at another year. And then you have guys like Gosman and Barrios and Bassett and Yariel Rodriguez, and you got a solid enough bullpen where like the Jays could make some noise in the American League East.
Yeah, and it really just comes down to, I think if you get Alonso and that is the rumored package deal where you get Max Scherzer, he'd be a decent fifth starter overall just to have, in
Hmm.
the back of the pen. Especially
Hmm.
because, Bowden Francis has only had 13 games started and,
Exactly.
half of those games he looked really bad in and half of those games he looked really good in where he almost had
He
a
was either
no-hitter
throwing a no-hitter or getting
or getting
chopped.
walloped. So
Yeah.
there's nothing that you're really sure what you're going to get coming into this year. Now, obviously, you want to have that second half of the season, but that's just not realistic where he's going to be
Hmm.
throwing no hitters every other game.
Hmm.
Um, and then another thing this brings up is when Manoah comes back from his Tommy John surgery, what do they do with him? Is he just
Hmm.
going to stay in AAA the rest of his career now?
I
But
don't know. He's got to figure out the pitch clock.
yeah, but getting Max Scherzer would just be kind of an interesting thing to have as like that fifth starter. He's only pitched 17 regular season games for the Texans or not the Texans, the Texas Rangers.
Yeah.
And he's been there for a year and a half. So
Hmm.
it's really been something where he can't stay healthy in the latter part of his career.
Hmm.
And, could this be like a potential last dance? Could this be a Celtics Shaq situation for Max Scherzer where he's, you know, not really doing much at the end of his career, but this is
Yeah.
just a weird thing where it's like, oh yeah, remember Max Scherzer played for the Blue Jays the last year of his career?
Yeah.
Um,
And you look at it like with Max Scherzer, like his last really good year was 2022 before he got traded to the Texas Rangers. And I think when you look at this also, and I didn't mean to cut you off, but just a little off track here, I'm going on a tangent, but like the Texas Rangers the last couple of years have made some god awful trades. When you look at trading Luis Angel Acuna and Cole Ragans in exchange for Aroldis Chapman and Max Scherzer, you're talking about two highly coveted, well, Angel Acuna Jr. is a highly coveted prospect. We know what Cole Reagans has become, but like if I'm the Blue Jays, I just like what am I gonna do with Scherzer? Like I don't even know what they would do with him. He's only thrown 88 innings in the last two seasons. Like if I'm a Blue Jays fan, like I don't really care about Scherzer, but like as a fifth starter, sure. Like, but again, I would have probably only pitch him like once a week.
Yeah, it's kind of a weird thing. Like he is 40 and he's going to be turning 41 in the middle of the season, and a lot of his uh other stats, like obviously he's getting worse with age. Like it's just what
Hmm.
happens. His fastball's been down.
Hmm.
Over the last year, his fastball velo is only around 92 miles an hour, not really getting that extension, but it's just been, he's just an old pitcher.
Hmm.
And this would probably be the last stop of his career, being,
Hmm.
41 at the end of the season. I don't think and you see what happens with Verlander, who's 42. Like,
Yeah.
uh, I think this would just be the end of the road for these two. And I think that's basically what it comes down to.
Yeah.
There's
Oh.
there's not much left they can do. The Jays, the one thing they needed was they need an extra bat, and I think if you can somehow ramp up the offer, give Pete Alonso a
Mhm.
2-year or a 3-year contract with two options, so it's kind of like that Cody Bellinger deal that Boris signed.
Hmm.
Uh, you can do something like that where you
Yeah.
just try prime away from the Mets, but it
Hmm.
looks like they're just being used.
Yeah, I think, when you look even at a guy like Scherzer, you talked about his dip in velocity. Like ever since his last great season in 2022, we're seeing the four seam come down, we're seeing the slider come down, we're seeing the changeup drop. We're seeing all of his pitches really drop significantly in velo to the point where like his slider, it's just very hittable. Like it in his fastball velo is at 92 as well, like as you had already mentioned, and it's just well below average on a lot of his pitches, especially the changeup. Moving at 82, like that's kind of turkey tossing it. But if it means you get Pete Alonso and then maybe you just switch Rodriguez and you put Rodriguez and Scherzer as your six-man starter, like who cares if he's your sixth? And then if it means you get a guy like Pete Alonso and do, as you mentioned, do the Boris way, where you get a couple opt-outs in there. And I don't think the Jays would mind that either, because maybe you don't want to commit to Pete Alonso long term, and then you can figure out with Vladdy what do you want to do, and then you have Alonso off the book, you'll have Vladdy off the book, and then you kind of just have an open salary where it's like, okay, we can offer some guys some contracts.
Yeah, and it's just been like one of the weird things where you want to get this guy, obviously. You want to get Pete Alonso. And if it is a
Hmm.
package deal, it's just a weird situation where you don't really know where you're going to fit this 40-year-old man, where you're going to put him in this lineup or in
Hmm.
this pitching staff. But Pete Alonso would be such a great fit for the Jays. He's just like the ideal cleanup hitter for the Jays right now.
Hmm.
You can move Vladdy to third, or you can put Alonso at DH for a majority of days. And that's one of the things about it. Also, Ben Verlander is one of the biggest idiots I've ever seen, where he put out a tweet and was like, "Oh, a team with Alonso, Vladdy, and Santander would be fun. Not good defensively, but they'd be fun." First of all, the Jays have won the team Gold Glove in back-to-back years, and they added a Platinum Glove second baseman.
Yeah.
So
And Pete Alonso plays solid first. Like
yeah,
he's not a schmuck at first base.
yeah. And how would the Jays get worse adding a DH to their defense? Like, there's no way. Like, they didn't. And Jay's Twitter like bullied him. I was like, "Are you stupid? We've been like he got
We need
ratioed and
offense. Like
yeah,
we forget defense for 5 minutes.
yeah, and like they still have one of the best defensive teams even without even with adding Anthony Santander, who isn't a good defender.
Hmm.
There's still enough around him that they have a good defense, but that's Ben Verlander. We'll talk about him later too. Last thing we can talk, or not last thing, but moving on, we can talk about the Atlanta Braves getting a deal with Jerks and Profar done, a 3-year, $42 million deal. To fill a gap in their outfield. Now their outfield is Profar, Michael Harris, and Acuna. There's not a lot of defense on the corners, but very good in center field.
Hmm.
But the Braves needed to make a move. They've basically done nothing this whole offseason. And
Hmm.
now you finally get a deal done with Jerks at Profar. A solid deal, but it's kind of iffy because this guy just had a career year and you don't know if he can really, replicate that and
Hmm.
make the full length of the deal like really worth it in the long run.
Yeah, and I think the one thing that was interesting about this Profar deal is like, yes, it's a 3-year deal for what, like $42 million. So it sounds cheap, but when you look at this in a vacuum, like he's coming off a 1-year, $1 million deal. Like there's a reason why he signed for 1 year and $1 million. Like he had a monster career year in San Diego, where in 2023 he hits 9 home runs. 2024 he goes all the way to 24 home runs, a 689 OPS to an 839 OPS. His slugging was insane. His on base was at 380, which would have been the highest on the Braves last season. And it's a guy that doesn't strike out a ton as well, and he actually walks nearly as much as he strikes out. So this is a phenomenal bat to add. But the only thing is, it's like, was last season a blunder? Like, you never know. But I think with a team like the Atlanta Braves, who have done a great job of developing bats and talent within house as well, I think it's a phenomenal contract for them. And I think it's the one team where it's like, if you're in the National League, like the one team you wouldn't want him to go to is the Atlanta Braves. But I mean, defensively, woof. Because Jurickson Profar defensively was not very good at all last year, and Ronald Acuna Jr. is not that much better in terms of range, but their arm talent and the arm strength is good for both of these guys. It's just covering the field that they
Yeah.
struggle with.
Yeah, and that's kind of the issue with it, where now you got a left fielder and a right fielder that can't really range the outfield. Well, they got a hell of an arm, but you know they aren't really that rangy. And how much is Michael Harris going to have to carry in that
Oh
outfield?
my God, but he's a stud
Yeah,
defensively, but it's like
he,
he's literally going to have to cover the entire grass.
yeah, like he's going to have to shade into right or shade into left and basically leave center field wide open. Uh, it's just I get the deal from the Braves. They needed to make a move this offseason. It seems like they'd been
Mhm,
doing absolutely nothing at all. And you traded away Jorge Soler, traded
mhm.
him to the Angels. You got Canning from the Angels. It's just like,
And then let him go.
yeah, and it's like how much more they need to do more. Like
How much more help do they need? I know, I get it. Like, I'm totally with you.
yeah, the Braves are just a super team, man. Super
Yeah.
team. Super team on the injured list. Everyone's there. But yeah, it's like everyone else that they have on their team. Like they lost Charlie Moore and their pitching staff has been kind of, going through it.
Uh-huh.
Besides Chris Sale, you lost Max Fried. Um,
Hmm.
like the Braves were kind of having the offseason from hell where it's like, okay, what are we doing? Like we're not really doing anything.
Hmm.
Are we just waiting for Spencer Strider to come back and, take everything back and hopefully he's the exact same as he was before the injury? Like
Hmm.
there was a lot of
Yeah.
question marks going in about the Braves offseason, and this really doesn't help that all that much, but it's at least something.
Oh, yeah, 100%. And I think, look, personally, like, I don't really fault the Atlanta Braves for what they've been doing this offseason, just because I don't think they were expecting Charlie Morton to go out and get a $15 million contract to be a number 5 starter, what he would have been in Atlanta. It made sense for the Orioles. They were desperate. And then you look at a guy like Max Fried, and like, no disrespect to Max Fried, my fellow Jew from Harvard Westlake, but I don't think anyone in their right mind was expecting a 31-year-old Max Fried with shoulder problems to get an 8-year contract from any team. So I don't really fault the Atlanta Braves. Alex Anthopoulos is a pretty smart general manager, and he was looking for the right deal, and maybe they saw something in Jerickson Profar. But I think when you also look at it from the pitching standpoint of things with the Atlanta Braves, is like, Spencer Strider's coming back. Spencer Schwellenbach looked really, really good last year. Like he was putting up some 10 strikeout games. Like they definitely think highly of him. Like this is a phenomenal pitcher who's very young and has a lot of talent in him. And then you also look at it with Reynaldo Lopez and other guys as well on their roster. And I'm just talking about from pitching standpoints, like, yes, it's been an underwhelming offseason for the Atlanta Braves, but I think the way that they've handled things isn't all that terrible when you just look at the cheap contracts that they have and guys that are serviceable, even, guys like Grant Holmes as well. What do they do with Smith Shawver and Hurston Waldrep? Like those are guys that also got reps in the MLB, but I just think they look at this as like we have a solid rotation and we don't it was a very top heavy starting pitching class, and I think they go get Jack Flaherty. Like I think it makes so much sense for them to be like, Jack Flaherty, here's 2 years, 60 million with a player option. Or maybe not that much, like 2 years, maybe 50 million, or even 2 years, 45 million with a player option. I think Flaherty to Atlanta makes the most sense.
Yeah, and it would make sense just to have because they're back of their rotation now. You obviously, like you said, Charlie Morton went and signed with the Orioles for a $15 million deal. And you lose Max Fried, and yeah, there is Spencer Strider coming back, but you just need to find a way to get
Hmm.
more going on in this Atlanta Braves rotation. Um,
Hmm.
and yeah, signing Jack Flaherty would be one of the best. He's still out there and he's still posting on Twitter saying like there's nothing wrong with what the Dodgers are doing, and everyone's like,
Buddy's fiending to become a
I
Dodger.
know, it's like, buddy, you you don't have a job right now. What are you talking about? Like, go find you gotta get a job first. And then
Yeah.
he's like talking with Brent Rooker and like, oh, Brent Rooker's my favorite player. It's whatever.
Yeah.
Uh,
But yeah,
yeah,
Flaherty to Atlanta, please.
that please. Damn, you really want him to leave that bad?
Well, he's already left.
I know, but bro, what about the 10-man rotation of the Dodgers?
I know. Crazy.
Moving on, last thing we'll talk about is the San Diego Padres and their situation in the offseason. Now, we talked about the Braves not really doing anything. The San Diego Padres have literally done nothing this whole offseason.
Hmm.
Obviously, there's a reason behind that. The owner of the San Diego Padres passed, and now the two brothers that uh, the two brothers of the owner or the two sons of the owner are now
Yeah.
fighting over you know rights to the team and all that, and there's kind of the whole situation with their going bankrupt. uh
Hmm.
there's just a whole mess that's going on in the San Diego Padres right now. And
Hmm.
what does this mean for the rest of their roster? Do teams start trying to make trades for Tatis, or mainly Tatis? Dylan Cease is one of the options too. Actually, an interesting point I saw is that the Braves are still under the competitive balance tax, and they could trade for Dylan Cease and still be under that. So that could be an option for the Braves. But it's just like, what's going on with the San Diego Padres?
Smiling through it all. Like, I mean, you talk about it. They were one game away from eliminating the Dodgers in the NLDS and then go on to get 27 innings in a row of 0 run support baseball. And you look at this like, yeah, we already knew that San Diego Padres were a team that was kind of struggling in terms of money. We always saw the thing about how they had to take out a loan. Um, that's like, I mean, I know that the owner passed away, but at the time it was kind of pathetic. It's like you seriously need to take out a loan. Like you're worth billions of dollars. And now you see there's arguments going on between the widow and the sons of like who gets ownership of the team. And you have Luis Arias and you have Dylan Cease. You have attractive players on your team. But I think what really shot them in the foot was giving these stupid massive contracts to guys like Manny Machado and Xander Bogaerts, where they're on your books until they're 41 years old. And don't get me wrong, I think Manny Machado is the best third baseman in the game today, or if he's not the best, he's certainly top three. But when you look at that Xander Bogaerts contract, like that looks like a horrible deal, even from right now onwards. And I just think they're like, dang, like we needed to allocate our budget better. And then you mortgaged your entire future for Jason Adam and Tanner Scott and Luis Arias, and it led to nothing. I mean, just to be blunt, like it led to absolutely nothing. And now this team is They lost Profar. They obviously lost Tanner Scott to their rivals, which was probably the last thing they wanted to do. And then they also lost Roki Sasaki to the Dodgers. And I thought Roki Sasaki was going to the Padres because of the potential there for him. And now you're taking Michael King to arbitration. And oh, geez, I just looked at Bogart's contract. You know, he's owed $25 million a year for the
Yeah.
next 8 years. Like, that is just horrible.
Yeah.
That is horrible money budgeting. And that's why Sasaki was like, I need to go to a stable organization. Like, oh my God, that Bogarts contract is what's killing this entire team. That's what's killing them, that they couldn't sign anybody else because Xander Bogarts is still making like $300 million.
Yeah, and they just have a lot of gaps in their, lineup right now. Hassan Kim still isn't signed. Uh, where the hell is he going? Kyle
Hmm.
Higashioka left. And they don't really have Luis Campusano was decent, but Higashioka was like their number one catcher.
Hmm.
17 home runs on the season.
Yeah.
Uh, they at least they have somewhat of a future still going where it's like, okay, we still have Tatis, he's 26. Jackson Merrill was a stud last year, came second in Rookie of the Year voting, and uh, they still have somewhat of a okay, at least we have something. Luis Ariz needs to be traded. I don't think they really want
Hmm.
him on the team anymore.
Yeah.
Um, and they just have a bunch of other guys where it's like, what else are we really doing?
Yeah.
Like you said, taking Michael King to arbitration. What do we do with Dylan Cease? Like he's going to be eligible for a
I
pay
forgot you
raise soon.
mortgaged the future with not mortgage, but you also gave up future for Dylan Cease.
Yeah, you did a whole lot for like this past year to be your year, and you did take the Dodgers to. You're the only team to have taken the Dodgers to the brink,
Hmm.
but it was in a 5 game series and wasn't in a 7 game series. Um,
Hmm.
if they could have won a couple more games, or even if they could have won a couple less games in the regular season, they could have been in the other side of the bracket. Probably could have had a better chance to, extend the series more at the Dodgers.
Hmm.
And it's just a whole bunch of, Joe Musgrove is going to be out for this year. Like they have a whole bunch of issues that are going to be
Yeah.
lining up.
Yeah, and I forgot. I apologize. Bogarts has like a little over $200 million, but 8 years, $200 million.
Yeah.
And like as you said, like they basically mortgage their future to go all in this year. But you even look at some of the other horrible contracts that they've given out, like even Jake Cronenworth getting that 7 year deal for $80 million. Like what good for him, but like, what are we doing giving Jake Cronenworth a 7 year deal for 80 million, which isn't a lot, but like years wise, like why is he on your books for that long? It doesn't make sense with some of these contracts that they gave out. And like, look, you still have Jason Adam for another year, you still have Michael King for another year before he becomes a free agent. I'm pretty sure this is his last year of arbitration. And it's just like, I mean, what is the direction of this team? Like, Hugh Darvish is still under contract until 2028. Like, I don't know what they really do moving forward here because I mean, they're horrible. Like, I don't even know who's going to be playing left field for them. Like, Tyler Wade? Like, who's playing in the outfield for this team right now? Because the only guys on their roster from the outfield is Jackson Merrill, Fernando Tatis Jr., and Brandon Lockridge. Like, who the hell is Brandon Lockridge?
Hey, don't disrespect him,
I've never
bro.
heard of this dude. He was like flipping pancakes at IHOP a couple months ago.
You know, we talk about the San Diego Padres. They've actually just made a move.
Oh my God. Who?
They traded for Ron Marinaccio from the
Oh my
Chicago White
God.
Sox for
Oh,
cash considerations. So
oh,
we're gonna have to scrap this whole section.
goosebumps. Goosebumps.
They just traded for a future Cy Young winner, Ron Marinaccio.
Oh my
Um,
God. It's like my God. So they traded for an uncle at the cookout. And
yeah.
I mean I'm happy with what's going on with them because I just think San Diego Padres fans, especially and rightfully so at the time, but during game 4, we're already like saying, oh, another year that the Dodgers choke, and now, 27 straight innings, you lose Tanner Scott, you lose Jerickson Profar. Michael King's probably like, seriously, like you got nothing, and now I gotta go to arbitration, and they still haven't settled yet pre-art, like they still have time before they actually go to the meetings to settle with Michael King. And I think what you got to do is like you got to trade Dylan Cease and Luis Arias and see what you could get back because their prospect pool. the San Diego Padres. It's terrible. Like it's terrible. I think Ethan,
Yeah.
and this could be my Dodgers bias, but I just think Ethan Salas is so overrated right now. Like they have Leody Dave Rice, who's a really solid shortstop. He is going to be really good for their future. But like outside of those two guys, like they really have nobody else that's really notable because they traded everyone. And you even look at their quote unquote top prospect in Ethan Salas, who at high A hit 206 with a 599 OPS. Like, I'm sorry, he's overrated. I don't get why he's still in the top 20 prospects in Major League Baseball.
Yeah. It the whole Padres situation right now is really just a huge mess. Like everything that they have going on, their entire organization has been flipped basically since the passing of their owner. Um,
God
there's just
rest his
arguments
soul.
between everyone. You lose Profar, you're basically gonna lose Hassan Kim. I don't think he's coming back. You
No.
lose Higashioka, you lose you like Joe Musgrove's out for this upcoming year. Like the Padres are gonna have such a decline, such a fall off.
Hmm.
I think they just gotta start looking at assets they have on their team and start making trades. There's
Hmm.
no way that they can just get through this and just say, yeah, we'll be fine, like we can still
No.
contend. No, there's no way you're still contending
Hmm.
in the NL like this. You got to
Hmm.
look at what you have and try and make a deal. Like go to the Braves and say, "We'll give you Dylan Cease." They would use him instantly.
Hmm.
Dylan Cease would be the perfect fit for the Braves right now,
Hmm.
where they just add him and they're still under the competitive balance tax.
Hmm.
Perfect spot for them to go. And they have a bunch of young prospects they can give you.
Yeah, I think, when you look at the Atlanta Braves and what they could give up, like, I think it's been pretty clear that guys like Cam Committee and Drake Baldwin are pretty much off the table. But is a guy like J.R. Ritchie available? Do you want to wait that long for him? Or you know what? Even a guy like Hurston Waldrep, who has had time in the major leagues, and I know that might be a little bit of a overpay by the Atlanta Braves, but you're talking about one of the best pitchers in baseball and Dylan Cease. You're going to have to give up to get some. So I wonder, but yeah, I think Atlanta would honestly make a ton of sense, especially in that competitive of a division where you already have the Mets and the Phillies, and the Mets starting pitching isn't as great as well, where you could get a little bit more leverage over a team like the Mets in terms of a starting pitching standpoint.
Yeah, I feel like that's the team that makes the most sense for them right now, especially because it works with money. The Braves don't get over that threshold where they have to pay more money.
Hmm.
They get to stay one of the lower spending teams and they get one of the best pitchers in baseball.
Yeah.
It just makes too
Yeah.
much sense. And the Braves love
Yeah.
making these kinds of deals where they did the same thing with Chris Sale last year, where it's like, oh, well, team's looking to get rid of this guy. Well, we'll just throw in a couple things and get a deal done. But yeah, one last
Yeah.
thing I want to talk about.
Ooh.
Uh,
Ooh.
we kind of skipped over it. Ben
Oh.
Verlander. Ben
Well,
Verlander.
we talked about this with your Blue Jays.
No, but I'm saying about what he said about the Padres,
Oh God. Yeah.
where he made a tweet where saying like, guys, the Padres have done nothing this offseason, and it's all because of the ownership. Yeah, with all due respect, their owner died. Like
Yeah.
there
Yeah.
isn't
Like,
this isn't a thing where it's like, oh, same old Padres never doing anything in free agency. No, their owner literally like passed away.
yeah, that
And
was
then
like, I was kind of shocked by that.
yeah, and people flaming him in the comments saying, "Hey, like, it's because the owner died." But
Yeah.
Ben Verlander, one of those guys in the media that's literally only out there because of his brother.
Hmm.
Um, and
Whoa. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
what happened?
The guy who collected the Paul Skeens card is taking it to auction. He declined the Pirates offer.
The 11-year-old from LA.
Yeah.
So his dad
Dang.
declined the offer.
Yeah, his dad declined the offer.
Yeah.
Dang, that was a big. I didn't mean to cut you off. I'm sorry, but I just saw that like it got reported now. Like, damn, boy.
I mean, why would I need 30 years of Pirates season tickets as a kid who lives in LA? I'm not
I
moving to
know.
Pittsburgh.
That'd be pretty cool.
I know, but if it was like what else was it? I know it was 30 years behind home plate, which
Yeah,
is it's a cool deal, but it's like
You get two signed jerseys from Skeens. You get to have a game in the suite with Livy Dunn. I think that already within itself is worth a lot. But um, and then you also got like a private baseball game at PNC. And then you
Oh,
you got like a couple signed jerseys, that you got that, and then I think you got like a meet and greet, like a bunch of stuff. Like it was a whole laundry list of things. But I think taking it to auction, waiting until Skeens like finishes his career is honestly the best way to do it.
yeah, because that could be
That could be worth
just
a shitload of money.
yeah, that could be worth immense amounts of money, generational wealth from that Skeens card.
Generational wealth.
All right. But that'll just about do it for this episode of the Breaking News Bears podcast. I once again want to thank my co-host Evan Davis. I once again want to thank you guys, the listeners, for listening to another episode talking about free agency and kind of the deals still going on. Thank you for listening to another episode of Breaking News Bears.